Everybody, welcome back to our Ask an Author segment. I'm just going to wait for Dave to hop in so I can invite him to the live and we will get started. Okay, here's Dave. All right, just sending. Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for taking the time to get on this live with us.
Sure, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll just start off with a little intro and then we can get right into it.
All
All
right.
right, so hi everybody who just joined on. Welcome back to our Ask an Author segment. Today we are lucky enough to sit down with Dave McKeown, the author of The Self-Evolved Leader, Elevate Your Focus and Develop Your People in a World That Refuses to Slow Down. Dave is also the CEO of Outfield Leadership and podcast host of Lead Like You Give a Damn. So Dave, thank you again so much for joining us. Why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your book, The Self-Evolved Leader.
Sure, happy to. So I'm originally from Northern Ireland, although I now live in Southern California. I just kept moving further west until the weather was good, and landed in sunny Southern California. And I started my career way back when in the UK working for Accenture, big IT consulting company. And it was during that time that I realized that those leaders who had the most impact on me and the team I was working with weren't necessarily the ones that were functionally the best at their job, although some of them were, but that they had a whole bunch of other mindsets, perspectives, skill sets, behaviors that really amounted to them being effective leaders. And it just sparked something off in me, a desire to uncover really what it meant to be a great leader, and then to help other leaders at any level of the organization develop that mindset and skill set and behaviors. And so moved over to the States about 10 years ago, have been working with senior leadership teams ever since. And the Self-Evolved Leader essentially is an outpouring of all of the work that I've done, both in individual coaching and team coaching over the last decade or so.
Wonderful. Okay, love that. So let's start in answering the first question. So thank you guys so much for submitting all your questions to us. We have a really great list of questions, so I'll just get right into it so you can start learning a little bit more about Dave. All right, question one. What inspired the idea for your book, The Self-Evolved Leader?
As I alluded to, it really was the written format of the work that I'd done over the last number of years. So I teach workshops, I do consulting, I do one-on-one individual coaching with leaders, and I wanted to find a way to essentially codify a lot of what I was doing with those groups and individuals and put it into book form. And I think it was New Year's Eve 2019, where I don't often make New Year's resolutions, but one of them was I want to get a book out this year. And so that started the process of getting in touch with you guys, and the rest is history.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Okay. So question number two, becoming an expert in leadership must have included a few lessons along the way. Can you share any learning experiences that may help future leaders listening to this live?
I mean, so many lessons along the way, and those lessons don't stop. I think one of the first and earliest and most poignant, I guess, lessons that I learned was from a manager pretty early in my career, who on the surface of things didn't exactly exhibit all of the characteristics that you would necessarily associate with, an effective leader, but he was really good at one thing, which was helping people, either people that worked with him or our clients or basically anybody he came across, helping them narrow in on the specific issue or challenge that they are faced with. Often we come burdened with challenges, and we talk in hyperbole or in the abstract, or it's them and not me. And he was really, really good at getting people to hone in on the specific issue. And the reason why that's so powerful is because then you can do something about it. When you recognize what the challenge is that you're working on, you can actually fix it. Whereas if it's abstract or ephemeral or out there, there's not much that you can do about it. And just watching him in action was one of the early inspirations for me to want to do what it is that I do now.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. I love that. So can you explain a little bit more kind of when you started thinking about leadership as a career? Because, sorry, this isn't a question. This is more so from my side. When was kind of like the turning moment that you decided that this is something I want to pursue a career in?
I think when it became a career for me about 3 years ago, in that I had been working in the industry for probably 7 or so years before that. I was working in the family business at the time, and about 3 years ago stepped away from that and was really evaluating what it was that I wanted to do next. And so I'd had some time working with Accenture doing IT consulting. I'd had some time working in the family business doing executive coaching, training, and consulting. And here I was now in a new position, trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And it was at that point where I realized, what I've been doing for the last 7 years, that's what really gets me going. That's where I get my endorphin rush. And so I set about starting my own practice and my own business. And I think it was at that point in about October 2017 that really solidified and cemented what it was that I wanted to do, because the previous 7 years was I was doing it, but it was a job and I hadn't quite made it my life's mission. But then about 3 years ago, like I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And the book is part of that, I guess.
Yeah, I love asking that question because I just finished reading Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And
yeah.
He talks about kind of the turning point in which he understood what he wanted to do and how he wanted to pursue that career going forward. And I think it's so interesting to always hear from our authors, what is that turning point that you established, this is something I want to pursue. This is my why. This is why I'm doing it. And I always love asking that question. So thank you for going a little bit off key here.
Sure.
Okay, question number 3. When should someone start developing his or her leadership skills? Should we start developing leadership skills even if we are not in a leadership position?
Yes, and I guess to the initial part of the question, as early as you want, and we've got to be clear to distinguish two things, or maybe even 3 things. There's the skill set, the mindset, and the behaviors that makes a good leader. There's applying that in a setting, and then there's having the formal authority, the formal leadership role that comes with it. I always advocate to build the perspective and mindset and behaviors of a good leader, no matter whether or not you want to pursue the formal position or title, because there's value in that. There's moral courage, there's character development in becoming a good leader merely for the sake of it. Too often when we pursue the role or the title or the authority, developing leadership skills becomes a means to an end, and the end is a nicer office or a promotion or a team that works underneath us, and then you get brittle leadership. Whereas if you set out and say, hey, you know what, I just want to learn some of these traits in and of themselves, that'll pay dividends, because the circle, the overlap between being a good person and being a good leader, whilst it might not be a complete circle, it's pretty close. And so you do that and you're developing just great character strengths as a result of it.
Absolutely. Okay, so just going more into that. So let's say we have a younger person in a leadership role. So how do you recommend to start, building up those skills a little bit if they're newer in that space? Do you recommend, books, podcasts? What's something that you personally used, tools to use to build up your leadership skills?
I think just to elevate it up a level, taking control of your own development in that way is the be all and end all in all of this. One of the characteristics of effective leaders is that they push for their own growth, and often our organizations have, or we've sort of got lazy, and we believe that our organizations are there to develop us, but actually those leaders that are most effective are the ones that do grow and develop themselves. And so, start from the inside of the circle and look out. Look to your initial, your manager, your boss. Are they a good people developer? Are there lessons that you can learn from them? Are there ways in which they can help you grow and develop? Does your organization have a formal program for emerging leaders? If not, then begin to build that out. And the more information that you can take in the earlier stage of your career, the better. So read a lot. I think podcasts are great, but here's what I would encourage to begin to think of is, don't just look for leadership advice from leadership books, which is funny coming from a guy that just released a leadership book. They're great and they're good, but they're one person's perspective on a very specific niche topic. Where you get a much broader experience and a much broader understanding of leadership is outside of the sphere. So, historical biographies or people's journeys and creative processes, whether they're musicians or artists, or just people that are talking about building culture that's not necessarily within the workplace. There are leadership lessons that are so broad, and often in the leadership industry, as much as I love it and owe my livelihood to it, we get very narrow in how we view things. And so I would encourage to explore and investigate beyond just that one sphere or lens.
Absolutely. Never stop learning, never stop growing.
Definitely not.
Awesome. Okay, question number 4. What was your experience like publishing with Greenleaf Book Group? What was your favorite part of the publishing process, or were there multiple favorite parts of the publishing process?
My experience was incredible from beginning to end, very seamless. I mean, the team at Greenleaf is just awesome. I think there were a couple of really rewarding, affirming parts along the way. I mean, I really enjoyed writing the book immensely, really enjoyed that. There was a moment that happened when you submit the transcript in its entirety, and there's sort of a week where the editors read it, and then they come back to you with a recommendation on the level of editing that you need. So from at the top, which is, we need some big structural elements moved all over here, all the way down to the bottom, which is we need some spelling, grammar, proof, typos, that sort of thing. And I had actually, nobody had read it. I didn't share it with any friends or family. I just wrote it in I guess a vacuum. And so this was the first real bit of feedback that I got on it, and it was just so affirming whenever the response came back and said, hey, you know what, we really only need a few spelling and grammar tweaks here, like structurally this is sound, the content looks good. I was like, wow, I guess I did something right here. And so that was pretty awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, actually I do remember the week that we were reviewing your book, and we were all just so excited about it because I believe we did your dad's book, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So I remember that week when we were reviewing it, and everybody was so excited. And so when it went into that editorial diagnosis, I know the editors, they were just thrilled about the content, thrilled about the structure. So I'm glad that was such an inspiring part for you, because it was as soon as we got it in our doors, we were all really excited about the book.
That's awesome.
So I'm glad that you were too. Okay, question number 5. What do you think are the 5 key qualities to any great leader?
So I talk about them, 5 qualities of a self-evolved leader. One we've talked about, which is a push for growth. So you're in charge of your own development. Don't wait for anybody else to develop you. Second thing is to lead with vulnerability. So Brene Brown is obviously the leading voice on this, but I think it's hugely important. We've been fed old models where the old leadership models say that you've got to lead through certainty. You've got to be the one at the front saying, I know where we're going. But actually, in a world of complexity and ever increasing complexity, that's just not feasible. There are too many variables. And so we've got to show up with a degree of vulnerability that says, I don't know all the answers. Here's my best guess. What do you think? Let's go together. Tied to that then is leading through empathy, which is to not just put yourself in somebody's position, but to try as much as possible to think the way that they would think and feel that they would feel, to really see in their perspective what's in front of you. That then links on to the penultimate one, which is an understanding of the deep connectedness between not just you and your team, not just your team and your organization, but also your organization and the community around you. That the decisions that we make as a leader and as an organization have deep and profound impacts on the community that we serve. And the more that we can start with an aim of wanting to serve that community, the better. And then the final one, final characteristic of a self-evolved leader is to operate from your own position of control. And by that I mean not to be overly controlling, but to understand the sandbox that you play in. There are a great many things that we would all love to change about the world. There are so few things that we have complete control over. Great leaders focus on those things that they can control and don't worry about the rest. And what they see or what they find happen is that circle of control that Covey talks about, it increases over time, and that actually then we can have a greater and deeper impact on more and more things if we stay focused on those things that we can control.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think it definitely goes back to what you were first saying about being a good person, being a good leader. Sometimes a lot of those overlap. And I think where a lot of people get stuck is they get so narrowed in on, being a good leader means I need to have all the answers. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to follow a certain criteria for success, when great leadership comes from within. And, there can be someone who you admire who has a great leadership strategy, but yours might be a little different. And it's finding that happy balance between, what you've learned, what you've taken into context, what you've applied to your life, but also what you feel strongly about. If you feel strongly about empathy, compassion, and things like that, really bringing that forth in your leadership strategy and not following any certain ratio of what you think you need. Really trying to take in everything that you've learned and really try to apply the core values of leadership and the core values of not only being a good leader, being a good person, and trying to find that perfect mix.
Yeah, I think you're right. You touched on something really core actually to the book, which is this notion that great leaders are supposed to know the answers, and most managers and leaders have a perspective that aligns with that, particularly newer managers and leaders. And the reason makes sense. We've been taught all our life. We've been rewarded by knowing the answers, both in school and then in the workplace. But at some point that becomes a liability, because what happens if you take the perspective that you either know the answer or you're just going to solve the problem for your team, what happens is you start leading through these acts of heroism, and your team develops this sense of learned helplessness, where they say, well, if you're just going to solve all my problems for me, I'll just go and give them to you and I'll stop thinking for myself. And one of the core shifts in the book is to move away from that mindset towards actually developing your people, because that's where you add the most value as a leader.
Absolutely. I definitely agree, because you're not a great leader without your great people with you too. And it's, your tribe makes you the leader that you are, and definitely helping build your people as much as you're building yourself is so important as well.
It's everything. At the end of the day, I think one of the things that we've got to be sure of when we're moving into a leadership position is why we're doing that. What's your intention behind it? And if you're not, if it doesn't consume you to want to improve the lives of the people that you're leading, then you're not in it for the right reasons. There really is no other reason to be a leader than to develop the people that are around you. If you think about the amount of time that we spend in the workplace or with the people that we work with, it's more certainly than most of the time that we spend with our friends. In some cases, we spend more time than we would with our own family. So why wouldn't you go into it with the perspective of, it's my job to develop them and make them the best version of themselves, or at least help them get there?
Yeah, especially, and going into, I know it's been written about a bunch of times, the top 5 people that you are with the most throughout the day are a reflection of yourself. So
right.
Building those people around you as much as you're building yourself is so extremely important. And I love that you went more into that. So thank you for going a little bit off the record with me as well.
Sure.
Second time. Okay, question number 6. Would you do anything differently for your next book?
In terms of the writing of it, the publishing of it, the marketing of it, like what?
I'm assuming this question was the publishing of it. Would you do anything different? It can be, if you have multiple things that you would do differently, if you had some learning experiences, just kind of go into whatever you feel comfortable with.
I probably wouldn't release it a month before the entire global economy shut down as a result of a public health disaster, but that wasn't really in anybody's control, was it? That certainly added a snag into the mix. And the funny things, people would ask, how's it going? And I say, good considering. And there was this perception that book sales would have increased as a result of everything that happened. But funny enough, I don't know whether in your experience, from what I heard in general across the board, it was a little bit of a challenging time. So my suggestion to everybody on the call is go buy books. You know what? I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite far enough past the launch to have done a full post-mortem and what I would do differently. I think there are a lot of really good lessons from a marketing perspective that I would need to unpick and unpack whenever we get there. But in terms of the work that Greenleaf did, I mean, it was phenomenal, and the support that I felt was exceptional. So I definitely would take a lot of that value and the lessons that I learned from you guys away from it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, with the public health, I mean, no one was expecting this to happen. So unfortunately, we have to play the cards that were dealt. But I mean, to what you were saying, no one was really expecting this. I mean, we at Greenleaf, we were just absolutely, oh my goodness, this is happening. Yeah. To everyone, not just us, and we're trying our best to, make sure that we are supporting those authors as best we can, definitely within this whole pandemic. So yeah, definitely understand that though.
Yeah, I mean, can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
I think the one, I mean, I don't even want to say silver lining because it has been so terrible for so many people, but I think if there's one thing that'll come away from it, that might be in the positive column, is I think it's accelerating a movement which essentially I was hoping the book would achieve, which is this movement towards a more human-centric way of leadership. And I think it has put some humanity back in how we relate to one another. And I hope that maintains as we continue to emerge from what we're emerging from.
Absolutely. And even though we are all quarantined and everything, I feel like we are making connections over the ability that we're unable to. So, I mean, figuring out those core values of why you do what you do, especially during trying times like these, is especially kind of bringing out the company's best foot forward. Right. how they're responding, how they're reacting, and what they're doing to help. I think, seeing so many people and seeing so many companies come up with, new ways and strategies to help, supplement the areas that, are being affected by the pandemic for sure. Yeah. So definitely love that answer. Okay. Question number 7. What books inspired you to write your own?
A few. So you can see just behind me, I've got this little bookshelf, and it kind of ends up with the Self-Evolved Leader, and there were a bunch of books leading up to it. There's a book called Rethinking Organizations by Frederick Laloux, which is it's sort of not a very well-known book, but it's got an incredible perspective. He was a Belgian politician, I think. Incredible perspective on how we might rethink organizations, in particular organizational structure. A book called Mastering Leadership by Anderson and Adams, which presented sort of a holistic position or perspective on leadership that I'd never really heard before, and I really enjoyed that. I've got Brene Brown's book up there, a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, which is all about managing your attention. a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, which is all about how to tell stories more effectively, and then a book called The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Stanier, which is an excellent book. And yeah, so they all, I guess they were the inspiration as I was getting closer and closer to writing it. I sort of read them within a year or so of writing it, and then I guess out popped the Self-Evolved Leader.
Love it. I always love to ask that question. I love hearing the answers because it's so interesting to see what books inspired, the next great writer to write their own. And I always love the answers. Plus, it gives me more recommendations to add to my list.
Absolutely. And I hope one day when you ask somebody that question, they'll say The Self-Evolved Leader by Dave McKeown.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't worry. That's actually one of the next ones on my list is to read your book. So awesome. I'm really, really excited for it. Okay. So question number 8, do you have any leadership advice for younger listeners, in Gen Z in particular, that are entering the workforce for the first time and looking to stand out to upper management?
A couple of things. I mean, first of all, be intentional about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Like we said earlier, leadership positions for the sake of leadership positions are sort of a fallacy that we've been sold, that promotion is the only way to succeed. And actually, there's a great degree of fulfillment in saying I don't want to go that route. But in being intentional about it, it goes back to Simon Sinek and starting with why. At least it gives you that sense of why it is that you want to do it. And my biggest bit of advice that's not tactical, I guess, in nature, but it's don't let go of your voice. Don't let go of who you are. We have a tendency when we get into the workplace to sell a version of ourselves that we think other people want to buy. And I mean that through the jobs that we get, the promotions that we get. And what happens is when you sell that version of yourself, you then end up having to perform as that version of yourself. And you do that more and more and more, and you end up 45 years old and a distant echo of who you were whenever you joined the workplace. I think that there's a movement much more towards authenticity in who we are, for lack of a better word. And my encouragement is, in whatever you're doing, try not to lose what made you you and special. So, you're wonderful and quirky and unusual and strange and different, and all of those things are great, and be that in the workplace just as much as you are outside of the workplace. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about Gen Z and what they're going to do for workplace culture, and I hope one of the things that they will do is to strip away some of the corporate kind of BS that a lot of the rest of us have subsumed to, and will address it much more in a we're just people. You be you, I'll be me. Let's not worry about deep voices and acronyms and speaking in a way that exerts our professionalism, and will be much more like you can be 100% you and be professional and have a conversation just like this without feeling the need to dress it up in any particular way. So that would be my advice. Don't lose your voice. Just stay true to who you are.
Absolutely. And finding that passion, I think, is something that's so important. You touched on this a little bit because, when so many people leave college, they feel like they have to sell themselves. And unfortunately, finding work and going into a job that you are not passionate about is just going to ultimately cause a burnout, because I didn't graduate that long ago, and something I really wanted to focus on was going into both an industry and a company that had the same mission, had the core values that reflected my own, because once you go into work and you are with a company where the core values and the mission isn't something that you agree with, or you're having to act like a different person and sell yourself a different way, it's ultimately just going to cause unhappiness. It's going to cause a burnout. And so keeping in mind, why are you doing what you're doing? What's your major? Why do you want to go into this industry? And then finding the company that reflects those values that you have as well.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's vitally important. And I would layer onto that, don't be afraid to back out at the point at which you realize that there is time for a change. I think that we've got to be careful in selling pursue your passion, because on the dark side, it makes people feel like if I'm not overly passionate about something that there's something wrong with me, or that I can't change my passions. Like, pursue the passion that you're passionate about in the minute and take it to its logical conclusion. And you know what, if you wake up tomorrow and you want to be a doctor, awesome. If you're passionate about that, go do that instead. Don't feel we shouldn't feel that we're locked into pursuing one passion for our life. We've got to be passionate about whatever it is that we're doing. And it's okay to be passionate about multiple and several things as you go through.
Absolutely. And finding, and especially something that I've explained, my little brother is graduating college this year, and he's still deciding what he wants to do. He doesn't know where his passion is. So, find out what you like, find out what interests you, and then try a bunch of different things out. And that will help you find your voice and find your vision a lot more clearly. So definitely.
100%. And there's something that happens that once you get a couple of those under your belt, when you start to look back, you'll see the common thread through all of it, whatever it is, whether it's a core value that you have, or a particular bit of work that you like to do, or a certain person that you like to work with, or the impact that you want to have. We have, Marcus Buckingham talks about them. He calls them red threads that are throughout our life and our career. And they're not, it's hard to project them forward. It's much easier to look backwards and see what those threads are.
Absolutely. And just something to add, don't feel like you need to have it all figured out right now.
No.
Because none of us have everything figured out. And, just focusing on you and what makes you happy. And you don't have to have it all figured out right now. That is what, entering the workforce is for. Not everybody leaving college, nobody has an idea of what they want in life. That's, you're figuring it out along the way. It's the journey of getting to where you're going. And, we're still all figuring it out. So don't feel like you need to have, what you want to do, what your exact passion is. This is the time that you're learning. So just
absolutely
remember yourself, and remember your core values of being who you are. And don't worry, it comes with time, and it comes with the experiences and the lessons along the way.
And the thing that you will learn and discover as you grow throughout your career is actually, really, and it pains me to say this, the adults really aren't in charge. I think that we have this belief that at some point we'll get into a room and we go, oh, this is where the adults are that are in charge. We're all making it up to some extent. And some of us have got it together a little bit more than others, but we're all getting up every day and trying to figure out what's right and good and valuable for us. So I love that bit of advice. Don't worry about it, and just focus and concentrate on experimenting, because like you said, out of college, like, that's the best time to do it. As Gary Vee says often, if you graduate college and you spend the next 10 years figuring out what it is you want to do, you'll wake up and you'll be 35. You'll still have so much time to actually dedicate your life to that, and so there's time to experiment.
Absolutely. And I'm going to give a little secret. None of us know what we're doing. None of us left college having a clue. We were learning along the way. We're learning from people that inspire us. We're learning from colleagues that inspire us, and mentors that inspire us. We're learning all these things along the way, and it's going to come more clearly, the more you get out there and just learn about yourself. Because leaving college, you're still so young. You still have so much more life to explore, and you're still not even evolved as a whole person yet. So don't feel like you need to know all the answers. None of us do.
I'll thumbs up on that.
Awesome. Okay, so last and final we have another question, number 9. Who inspires you?
Out of everybody, my wife inspires me the most. She just has a a heart and a way of being that was not necessarily what I was used to or familiar whenever I met her. And she has made me into the best version of myself and continues to do that every day. So I'm forever inspired by her and her vision for the life that she wants to build, and the work that she puts in to get there.
That is amazing. Kudos to your wife, because that is just such a beautiful answer, and I love that answer so much. Okay, question 10, final question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, what book are you currently reading?
I'm so ready. I've actually got it right here. So I have a tendency to flick between fiction and nonfiction. I don't always do it, but I try to keep a good cycle on it because my natural gravitation is towards nonfiction. And so I'm on a nonfiction cycle at the minute. I'm reading Me, which is Elton John's autobiography. Like I said earlier, I think there's a lot of valuable lessons to be had in places outside of the leadership sphere. And I have a particular strange, weird fascination about the creative process and how artists and creatives get to where they are and the hard work that goes into that. And so I'm just enjoying Elton John's autobiography.
Oh, love it. Love it. That's actually one I've been wanting to add to my list as well. So you'll have to let me know how it is.
I will do.
Okay, so that was actually our last question. So thank you so much for joining us for an Ask an Author session today. Thank you for all of you who tuned in and all of you who told me that you were going to watch the video after it's posted. This will be up on our page for 24 hours as well, and then I will be posting it to our YouTube channel as well. So anyone who missed it in the 24 hours, you are welcome to watch it there. And thank you, Dave, so much for joining us. We will have the link to purchase Dave's book in our bio for 24 hours. So make sure to check that one out. It's called The Self-Evolved Leader. It's a great book. And make sure to keep a lookout for our next session. We are going to have more authors come on. So we love hearing your questions, and we love when you guys submit the questions to us. And they're always, a little bit different every time. And we really hope everybody enjoyed this session and found it super informative. I know I had a great time. So I hope everybody stays safe and stays healthy while we all get through this pandemic together.
Thank you. See you later.